It would be near impossible to uncover the exact moment in time when the majority of the Final Fantasy VII fandom began truly clamoring for a remake of a game that is undoubtedly still massively popular and heavily regarded as the defining RPG of its generation. What we can do is to highlight a moment when that movement seemed to first reach fever pitch. And that was clearly the reveal of the PlayStation 3 technical demo way back in May 2005. We now fast forward 10 whole years. After featuring in numerous spin-offs, various auxiliary media and games, after parading around in character-specific outfits and being spotlighted in special in-game events, the moment that the fandom had waited for with bated breath had finally arrived. Just a half a year before, we were offered the keys to paradise during the 2014 PlayStation experience, a grand build-up that led to the announcement of a port of the original game. But no, this was it. This was the moment. And so, during Sony's E3 press conference in June 2015, the long-awaited remake to Final Fantasy VII was finally, officially announced. We are now approaching 4 years since that event. For your viewing pleasure, or perhaps for your viewing hell, here are those 4 years in full as we take you on a trip through every major piece of info that we know so far. Despite euphoria pumping through the veins of the Final Fantasy VII fandom, the most immediate question was, why? Why now? After countless years of teasing and daydreams, what mystical alignment of the stars created this opportune moment to finally announce a remake of their fabled game? Did the media fallout in the wake of the disappointing PlayStation Experience event truly have a hand in all this? It certainly may have done. In an interview with Eurogamer in June 2015, Tetsuya Nomura stated the following: "There's more and more titles being introduced for the platform, and we're hoping that announcing the remake of Final Fantasy VII, it'll give a boost to people wanting to buy this current generation of console. If we announced the remake after all those titles have been sold, it wouldn't have created such an impact. So that's why we decided on this timing. We wanted to reassure players that PlayStation 4 is coming out with great titles, including Final Fantasy VII. That's why we decided to announce the remake." These comments certainly seem to indicate that the growth and uptake of the PlayStation 4 console in Japan played a key role in the exact timing for the announcement. Certainly, the announcement of the Final Fantasy VII port wouldn't have done much of anything to light potential future gamers on fire. We also know that the heads of Sony had been aware of the remake's development for about a year now. They certainly could have pushed for an announcement after the reception of the 2014 PlayStation experience. Regardless, we know that the remake had indeed been considered at various points throughout the years, as stated in various comments by Nomura. Actually, quite a while ago, I tried to start up the project, but at the time it didn't come to fruition. We've had plans for a remake on several occasions. Up until now, it's been a cycle of having plans come and go, but this time, we've decided, let's do it. The talks about making this remake, internally it's been mentioned on and off. Sometimes we think we can do it, and then sometimes we think we can't. Considering some of the original staff, we're all getting older. If we keep going like this, the thought occurred to us that we might have to pass it on to a younger generation, without the original developers taking part. It doesn't seem like such a grand intention, but we wanted to do it with the original members. But it wasn't until both Nomura and the original Final Fantasy VII director Yoshinori Kitase were approached by Square Enix exec Shinji Hashimoto that it finally became a reality. In an interesting footnote, Nomura was apparently surprised to discover he was even the director for the project. Then one day, as I was checking the internal company presentation video, it said, "Director Tetsuya Nomura" at the end. So I called up Mr. Kitase and said, "It says I'm director for some reason," to which he replied, "Of course it does." As for the fandom, the initial question of why now immediately shifted as speculation began spreading like wildfire on the exact nature and structure of the remake, as, from the onset, we knew this was never going to be a straight up simple remaster. When asked whether the upcoming remake would deviate from the source material, Nomura stated this: "In terms of taking such an iconic game and giving it a fresh feel, we're not intending for this to become a one-to-one remake, or just the original Final Fantasy VII with better graphics? We've announced an HD port version on the PlayStation 4, and then we have the remake coming to PlayStation 4. You'll have this extremely very pretty Final Fantasy VII existing on the same plane. We feel if that happens, it's like, why have the same exact game? For a large majority of fans, questions began arising as to whether this was going to be the true remake of the game they had waited so long for. What we do know is that the goal of surpassing the original has always been at the forefront of development. Nomura heavily hints that there is simply no point in doing an exact recreation of the original. They want to surpass it. This sentiment comes to the fore in an interview with Kotaku, when Nomura echoes his initial statement that this would not be an exact retread of the original game. I can't go into details, but this is not a simple remake. Let's say for argument's sake that we only pretty up the graphics for current gen hardware. I don't think that will surpass the original version. So if you're gonna do a full remake, you have to take a different approach and make something that suits the times. But what exactly would suit the times? Well, we have known and experienced for a long time now the gradual move away from turn-based battle systems within Final Fantasy games, and the implementation of more action-oriented mechanics. But what exactly would this mean for Final Fantasy VII Remake? We can't have these upgraded, beautiful 3D models of Cloud and Barret still lining up in a row, jumping forward to attack an enemy, then jumping back to wait for their next turn. That would be bizarre. Since there's a possibility that the command battle system of the old games might not work today, we're thinking hard about what kind of direction we can take it. We're not going to be changing it into a shooter or something like that. We are going to be bringing dramatic changes, but we want to make sure it's still recognizable. During the 2015 PlayStation Experience, a new trailer for the Final Fantasy VII Remake dropped. However, though you can begin to get a feel for what the remake will be doing with its battle system, it was still very much in the initial trial and error stages, as confirmed in various interviews which followed the release of the trailer. The only real solid info that we did become aware of was that parties will consist of 3 members and you'll get to freely switch between the characters, but it won't be a requirement, as you can stay the same character for the entire time. Whatever your personal outlook on the loss of the original battle system, this goldmine of an interview provided some additional details surrounding the actual structure of the remake. As translated by Resonant TLS forum member Hian, Kitase stated that, to begin with, the reason we haven't done the remake up until now is because it's really hard work to recreate everything from the ground up with current technology. And so, there was more than a little feeling that we couldn't just carelessly plunge into it. If we're gonna remake Final Fantasy VII in HD while retaining the feeling of density of the original, it will end up on a size that cannot possibly fit in a single installment. In order to assuage any fan fears that this was simply a sly money-making move, Nomura clarified things further by stating they would need to make extensive cuts if the game was forced within a single installment, creating a digest version of Final Fantasy VII. After a lot of speculation and articles online, Kitase later wrote on Square Enix's own blog and posted his thoughts to help clarify fan concerns. We've seen everyone's comments and reactions to the news that the Final Fantasy VII Remake will be a multi-part series, and many have speculated correctly as to the reason why we've made this decision. If we were to try to fit everything from the original into one remake installment, we would have to cut out various parts and create a condensed version of Final Fantasy VII. We knew none of you would have wanted that. I hope that by explaining a little more about our design decisions, that you can appreciate the size of this project and what we have planned for this remake. Going beyond the scale and depth of the world, narrative and gameplay from the original to deliver something that feels familiar yet new. As I said before, we like delivering surprises. Outsourcing elements of game development is a commonplace practice within the industry, but knowledge of a partnership with CyberConnect 2 was a surprising one to say the least. CyberConnect 2 will of course be very familiar to fans of Final Fantasy VII, since they had recently developed mobile spin-off minigame title G-Bike. Their efforts on the title must have really hit home with the team over at Square Enix, leading to this partnership. As stated by Katase via Hien's translations of this Famitsu interview, not only does CC2 have a wealth of experience and know-how concerning action games, we also felt that they had something of a shine in regards to their sense of video production. However, cracks seem to already be showing concerning this so-called partnership, though we learned that the first announcement trailer seemed to have been compiled and directed by CyberConnect 2, there were already several areas of disagreements concerning it. That being said, in the first teaser trailer, there were subtle differences from the production of our company, and so we had extensive exchanges on the matter. From this time's PV, Nomura was persistent, and we had them make it closer to our own style. The different styles exhibited by the two companies seemed to be causing friction concerning the actual presentation of the game, as we witnessed with the distinctly different tones of the two trailers. However, it will be some time before we witness the actual fallout from this. It certainly began to seem, not like fans hadn't been stating it for a long time as it was, that the remake to Final Fantasy VII had been announced far too early within the game's development. However, as we discovered in the information trickling out after the initial announcement, Square Enix did seem to have various reasons for doing so, specifically in supporting the PlayStation 4 in Japan, and with the availability of the key members of the team. Of course, this was no real solace when the fandom discovered that the game's development was still really in its infancy. As stated by Katase in an interview from Gematsu via Nova Crystallis, "We're at a stage when we can say we're finally getting started. We have ideas regarding battles, too, but it will take time to drop them into the actual game." And so, we come to the end of a wild 6 months ride since the initial teaser trailer. But what do we have to show for it? Well, we end on the sober note that the game was announced far too early, that the various mechanics of the now non-turn-based battle system were still being trialed, and that the game was going to be structured as a multi-part saga. But hey, chin up. The dream is becoming a reality. 2016 is going to be a great year of numerous info on the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Right? During the uproar that flooded the fandom concerning details that the Final Fantasy VII Remake will be broken down and structured as a multi-part saga, fans began to contemplate exactly what a multi-part saga would mean. Unfortunately, that thought also led everyone down the path to the inevitable aspect of DLC. For many, there was a growing concern that the remake would be given an episodic nature, with many gaming outlets reflecting on Telltale's The Walking Dead as a prime example of its possible structure, with story segments cut out into numerous parts and dropping like DLC add-ons. So it comes as no surprise that damage control was eventually implemented when episodic was the only thing on everyone's lips in reference to the Final Fantasy VII Remake. During an interview in April 2016, Kitase took to clarifying what exactly a multi-part saga entails. When the project was first announced, people were confused by its multi-part nature, but the goal is to structure it more like Final Fantasy XIII than an episodic series. It will essentially be a full-scale game for each part of the multi-part series. In 13, each installment told its story from a different angle. It was kind of like approaching an unknown territory in a sense. Whereas with Final Fantasy VII Remake, we already have a pre-existing story, so it wouldn't really make sense if that isn't encompassed in a multi-part series. So if we were just looking at each of these parts, one part should be on par with the scale of one Final Fantasy XIII game. Exactly how many installments the remake will end up as remains a mystery, especially since Square Enix confirmed that we shouldn't be looking at the game dropping anytime before April 2017, as spotted via their financial year report. Could we potentially be looking at a holiday 2017 release of the Final Fantasy VII Remake? Yeah. Nomura states that the game is still a while away, but not to worry, and that production is going at a steady pace. So, that was brief. When you look at it, April was the only thing that we got in 2016. Whoa, we got a lot of time to kill here. Just cut to black. We kick off 2017, which is also the 20th anniversary of the original Final Fantasy VII, with the announcement in January of a collaboration event between the Final Fantasy VII Remake and Mobius Final Fantasy. In a rather surprising twist, it was confirmed that this event would showcase assets actually used within the remake itself. Over on the Square Enix blog, Nomura went on to say, "Yes, we received 3D resources from the Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is currently under development, including Cloud, Guard Scorpion and the Mako reactor, which we then set up to fit within Mobius Final Fantasy." That's pretty neat. Following closely on the heels of this, Cloud was announced to soon be making an appearance within FF Brave Exvius, and they even designed an entire ice sculpture at the Sepro Snow Festival. It was also here that we were presented with the first key visual art for the remake, and boy was it beautiful. This picture also revealed the continued use of Roberto Ferrari, who we know is working with Nomura on the character designs for the game. Despite the teasing of the assets being used and the key visual art presented to us, the question quickly turned back to when we would actually see more of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. Combined with the rather rocky road of development for the game that eventually became Final Fantasy XV, and the rush to fix issues and patch content in the wake of its release, it doesn't really come as a surprise that we soon got various statements that development and progress on the Final Fantasy VII Remake was not in the same state as 15 was, and would not suffer a similar fate. In an interview with India Today in February, Shinji Hashimoto stated, "A game like FF7 Remake is not something you can do a half-hour's job on. You have to make it properly, with care and attention. It's not going to take a short time." Having said that, the thing about FF15 was, there wasn't one continuous development on the game. There were lots of things going on behind the scenes that a lot of people don't know about. So, we know that work on this game is going to take some time, and coupled with the information on the announcement coming way too early, it all begs the question, where exactly are we on the development timeline for the Final Fantasy VII Remake? Well, about 3 years out or so, if we take the outline of Square Enix's financial briefings as gospel. This outline revealed what the company were planning to release during the next few financial years, which included both Kingdom Hearts 3 and the Final Fantasy VII Remake. That is still a long ways off, and this is most likely only for the opening installment to the game. So what will happen in the downtime between installments? When asked whether they could do something like Final Fantasy XV's live streams and events, Kitase stated that a live stream or a program to keep in touch with the users is something I'd like to do, but Final Fantasy VII Remake will be episodic, and if we want to have it go all the way to the end of the original version, then I believe we'll need to devote everything we've got for it, so I have no idea what will happen for things such as filler development and other works. I thought we had agreed not to use the term episodic! Speaking of episodic, news that voice acting on the main game had supposedly been completed had fans wondering if the game was a lot further along than anyone had realized. Unfortunately, it seemed to be a case of mistranslation, with Kitase most likely meaning voice acting work completed on the initial installment, don't say episodic, of the game. This seems to tie in with what we later learn in July when Nomura reveals that, although there are parts further along than Kingdom Hearts 3, such as cutscenes, it is unlikely we'll share information for a while. Ever since we discovered that the Final Fantasy VII Remake would be a reimagining, fans have been left wondering what parts of the story would be altered, or even cut, within the flow of this new version of the game. For fans of the wider compilation, however, this uncertainty has been even more painful, as questions rose on exactly what would survive. Would we really be getting the story of Genesis and Geo within the remake? What about Deep Ground? Could we be getting little nods via NPCs or notes lying about? Could we be looking at fully playable DLC content, focusing on the compilation? Well, Nomura finally broke his silence on the subject. Concerning Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is a title loaded with a lot of mystery for now, it will be different from the original Final Fantasy VII. If we make a compilation, these games will hardly have an overall coherence. It will be difficult because there is no more continuity between the compilation and the remake for the moment. With repurposing the main story, including expanding a lot of characters and areas we never got to explore within the original, Nomura's comment makes sense that events wouldn't fully line up with the compilation, and so that continuity and timeline would no longer be upheld. However, what we still do not know is if this means that elements from the compilation will be eliminated completely, or snuck into the new storyline from the start. Unfortunately for fans of the compilation, that burning question remains unanswered. Though we have been waiting a long time to find out about the concept for the battle system within the remake, we finally got a lot of hints during the Magic event in February when several new photos of the game emerged. These photos depicted Cloud using a cover system to avoid gunfire from his opponent, as well as tackling a guard scorpion alongside Barret. Unable to show a video of those scenes, Nomura later went on to clarify the mechanics hinted at within those photos. In the story, in situations where you're sneaking around, you won't just be able to march down the middle of the path. The original version had random encounters, and such parts were in the realm of imagination, but since this title is seamless and you can see the path that you're infiltrating, I decided it was necessary for the sake of realism. You can use it in ways such as to hide cover until enemy soldiers move along, or to throw a hand grenade from cover to annihilate the enemy. Of course, those who find it bothersome can just throw themselves into the fight. Map and object destruction will also happen, and there are part-based destruction elements like breaking the guard scorpion's legs. The implementation of a cover system didn't really come as a surprise, especially since we saw Cloud maneuvering around rubble as seen in the earlier trailer. However, the juicy morsel of information announcing a limb targeting aspect within the remake was intriguing to say the least. What exact role materia would play within the battle system was still a closely guarded secret. The mentions of skill based on materia was all that Nomura would let slip. As we mentioned previously, the writing on the wall seemed to be quite visible, even early on, concerning the partnership between SE and CyberConnect 2. There were rumblings of an artistic vision disagreement between the two companies, which seemed to primarily focus on the tone and presentation differences within the public trailers for Final Fantasy VII Remake. It came to rather a surprising end when the announcement surfaced in May, stating that development on the game was now being switched internally. Naoki Hamaguchi, who was previously in charge of development on Mobius Final Fantasy and a developer on Final Fantasy XIII Lightning Returns, had this to say. So far, development has been carried out mainly with the support of external partners. However, in view of factors such as improving quality when the product goes into mass production in the future, the company has decided to switch the development system back to within the company, so as to maintain a stable schedule and have controls over factors such as quality. Stable schedule and quality. Oh boy. Whether the quality of CC2's work really wasn't on par or not, and it still to this day remains to be seen how much of CC2's work has been kept, removed or altered entirely, or if Nomura is simply too much of a control freak, it seems this unlikely partnership has come to an abrupt end. Fast forward to November, and major news concerning the remake is scarce. However, we have the Final Fantasy brand manager Shinji Hashimoto to keep our spirits up. Next year is going to be a big year. Next year will be the 31st year, and our teams are busy working on new titles. Next year will be a big one, and we will bring exciting new Final Fantasy games to the world. Please be excited! 2018! Boy, what a vintage year that was. And we start and end the year with the announcement that development on the game is going smoothly. That's it folks, one and done, see you in 2019. Okay, I kid, but only marginally. We really don't get much this year, it's pretty much a whole lot of nothing, with a lot of work still needing to be done with the game. This sentiment was reinforced when it was discovered that Square Enix were recruiting for both battle and level planners to work on the remake. Of course, there was a lot of speculation that these job postings were for subsequent installments of the remake. Regardless, it all just pointed towards not yet, or really not anytime soon. This excruciating wait also had a knock-on effect of making people jump the gun. A lot. So it came as no surprise that a translated comment by TLS forum member Hien about a comment Kitase made about delaying the game in order to keep polishing it for the 35th anniversary of Final Fantasy spread like wildfire. To celebrate the 30th anniversary of Final Fantasy, the Mori Arts Center in Tokyo hosted an exhibition event featuring some image boards designed from the Final Fantasy VII Remake, taking place between the 22nd of January and the 28th of February. We were also presented with a really neat look into the creative process of updating the art for the remake, via FFX and art director Shintaro Takai. Takai went into detail concerning the thought process of updating the game. In particular, the use of art to do more than simply look cool, but instead to have deeper meaning and realism behind it. According to Takai-san, it's not just a matter of improving the graphics. He wants to work while thinking deeper about it. For example, if you recover your energy with Cure, it shouldn't just be sparkly particles. He wants to create the effect while thinking, it's invisible energy drifting around the character while it gathers and is visualized. It's absorbed by the body and emits light. It was via a source on Twitter, Aibo, that we originally learned that legendary composer Nobuo Uematsu was involved with the Final Fantasy VII Remake. As translated by TLS member Hien, the printed interview from Kitase stated, "Currently, I am working on the FF7 Remake. And although Uematsu-san has been working on various titles, I haven't worked directly with him since FF10. When I first asked Uematsu-san to work on the music for the remake, he had already distanced himself from SE to work on other projects, so I was thinking I might be treated coldly. But, in a sad turn of events in September, Uematsu's decline in health later rendered him unable to continue working on his current slate of projects. With the annual June gaming event just around the next corner, a rather buster-short textured background on an image highlighting SE's showcase seemed to hint that the long-awaited remake could possibly making a new appearance at E3. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, with the remake being a no-show at the event. But fear not, Nomura is 100% working 100% on both the remake and Kingdom Hearts 3. So right now, it's like I've been putting 100% into Kingdom Hearts, 100% into Final Fantasy VII, 100% into Kingdom Hearts, just going back and forth. Nomura would later have to take to the net in November to reassure fans that the remake wasn't in some kind of development hell, and was being actively worked on. Rumors were spreading that development had only just begun, or was only now advancing, to which he stated, "Yes, that is not official. As I said during E3, development is going favorably." During a translation provided by Twitter user Miraculous Maku in November, news suddenly dropped that had the fandom speculating wildly as to the exact meaning and intention behind those words. Nomura seemed to state that various developments are being considered to accompany the FF7 remake in some form, thinking about something for compilation titles. But did he mean that he would be creating an entirely new compilation? Or simply that an extensive media strategy, including novels and anime, like what was provided with Final Fantasy XV, would accompany the remake. The makeover of all makeovers. The old G-Bike Twitter account underwent a rather curious change in mid-November, becoming a new account focusing on the remake. As the end of the year quickly approaches, we got a quick update informing us that development is going well. Deja vu? Where have we heard that before? Wasn't that at the very start of the year? But hey, 7 and long awaited are apparently the keywords for 2019, according to both Nomura and Kitase. Welcome! We start the year 2019 by jumping straight to April Fool's Day. But far from being a joke, there was a serious announcement that Naoki Hamaguchi, who you might remember moved from Mobius Final Fantasy to become development leader on the remake back in May 2017, now takes the role of co-director. And so, we come to the end of an epic 4-year ride on everything that we know so far concerning the Final Fantasy VII Remake. And what a journey it has been. But as we quickly come to another E3, and with Kingdom Hearts 3 finally released and wrapping up, there are certain signs pointing towards the remake marketing machine beginning to rumble once again. Check out our latest news stream video, as well as our articles on why we think these hints could have meaning. And don't forget to join us on both our forums and Discord to discuss all the latest in the run-up to E3 and the latest news on the remake.